Thank you very much, Cassie, for that generous introduction. I learned from Angie last night in her talk on entrepreneurship. I think journalists and authors, we can consider ourselves entrepreneurships, at least authors. To begin with it's always good to begin with a commercial interlude. So the three books that you mentioned, I call them the Real Hunger Games trilogy. They are not about some dystopian society, but they're all about hunger and malnutrition in the 21st century and what we need to do to overcome that, the reality of it, and then also the prospect that we can do something about it, led to a large part by the work of all you and Opportunity International. So it's great to be, so that's my pitch to the millennials. They can get out of the Real Hunger Games trilogy and inspire, hopefully, the next generation to also then get involved in this as well. And yeah, it's wonderful to be at another Opportunity Summit. We were trying to count them up earlier. Certainly the second, maybe the third. And to be among so many friends, kinship of the great passion that everybody in this room shares. I've been a long admirer of Opportunity. I've seen the work and the impact in the field so much. We wrote, Scott Kilman and I, my colleague at the Wall Street Journal, when we did the first book, Enough, wrote about Opportunity. So there's a section there about the work in Malawi and the great impact there, and followed the journey of Francis Pelican Moyo, who went from the central banker of Malawi to the banker of the poor and leading the operations of Opportunity in Malawi, and shared his inspiration as he was telling me his story, that in his daily readings that the Bible was searching for a reason to go from being the central banker to the banker of the poor, and he came across Matthew 25, where Jesus is talking about the judgment day, and for I was hungry and you gave me food, and all the passage that continues after that. And that's also been one of my guiding inspirations, and also as a journalist to have the passion of my journalism to write about this. So thank you to Atul for the invitation to speak here. And I said, kind of the friends that I made over the years with people at Atul, Linda and Ken, Dave Tolmie, John Magnay, and our long talks about him setting me straight on the markets in Africa and the influence of that. And John's also a cameo appearance in the book. More than a cameo appearance, a substantial part of the first book. And so also thank you for the opportunity to begin this day with some outrage and inspiration. So outrage and inspiration is my mantra as a journalist. If you'd ever look in on me on my bouts of writer's block, it wouldn't be particularly pretty, but I'd kind of be mumbling to myself, outrage and inspire, outrage and inspire. That's what I'm hoping I can convey in my writing, and particularly in the books. So first we'll start with the inspiration. I mean, we're all here to celebrate the progress that we're made and what we've been hearing about the progress on reducing poverty and hunger and malnutrition over the past decades. It's truly been a success, in some of the numbers that we were hearing from Atul and Larry. On the hunger front, we've been able to cut deaths from hunger basically by a half over the last couple of decades. So we're greatly moving the needle, and that's much to be celebrated. But despite all this, and here comes the outrage, childhood malnutrition and stunting, so kids getting off to the best start in life, this childhood malnutrition and stunting remains stubbornly high, particularly in Africa. That's largely due to a lack of nutrients. Atul yesterday and some of the speakers were talking about the importance of calories. We always measure kind of the progress on ending hunger and fighting back famine by measuring calories and the caloric intake. And there are enough calories in the world, if distributing evenly, for everybody to have an active life based on calories. But what's happening, and what is really persistent then, is this micronutrient deficiency, the lack of the vital minerals and nutrients that get people off to a good start in life and sustain us then through the entire life cycle. And this lack of nutrients then becomes particularly critical in this first 1,000 days period. The first 1,000 days is a time from when a mom first becomes pregnant, so the day of conception, to the second birthday of the child. This is the most important period in individual human development. It's the time when the foundation for physical growth is being set, when cognitive growth and development is happening at the most rapid and expansive rate in a person's life. What's happening in those first 1,000 days already when the child's in the womb, and so much happening with the brain growth and the cognitive development. And then the strengthening of the immune system for the child to have the ability to ward off chronic diseases later in life. So the most important period of individual human extension, of human development. But by extension, then it also becomes the most important period in development of our societies and our world as a whole. So the central outrage of this, and the central outrage of that book, is that, and it's kind of this lack of these micronutrients. All this activity that's going on in the first 1,000 days is then fueled by these nutrients and everything that supports good nutrition, the water, the sanitation, the hygiene, the good healthcare system that surrounds it. And it's this lack of these micronutrients in this period that then leads to stunting. The central outrage being that in our world today, 1 in every 4 children under 5 years is stunted in some manner, either physically, cognitively, or many times both. In Africa and elsewhere in the developing world, it's about 1 in 3 children under the age of 5. In some places, it's 40%, 50% stunting rates. Stunted children become stunted adults, so it becomes this lifetime hindrance and handicap. So the clinical definition of stunting, I mean, if you think of stunting, just the word stunting, stunted, it's a harsh word, it's ugly, it's brutal, stunting, stunted. The clinical definition of stunting is when somebody and a child is too short for their age, so height to age. So that's the physical stunting. But that doesn't do justice to what stunting really is and the true impact of stunting. What stunting is, it's this life sentence of underachievement and underperformance that's rendered by a child, in most cases, is 2 years old. It's the most pernicious impact of hunger. So we've made all this progress on knocking back famine, and hooray for that with the Green Revolution, everything that's come since then. And it's a tragedy of all the people that then still continue to die of hunger and die of famine. But the most pernicious impact of this hunger is on what becomes of those who survive. They carry that with them throughout life, and particularly the children that then are so impacted in this critical 1,000-day period. And so if you kind of consider the impact of stunting, it's like when you throw a pebble into a pond, and kind of these ripples then all come out from that. It kind of goes from the individual and the lack of education that would come, particularly from the cognitive stunting. The lack of earning potential later in life. Maybe they're earning 20 to 40% less as wage earners as adults. This higher propensity that I said to chronic disease later in life. So this healthcare burden that's carried through life. The next ripple then is on the family. That if there's one malnourished and stunted child in the family, it's probably more if they have more children. It makes that climb out of poverty so much steeper for these families. The next ripple then is the community as a whole. The labor pool, as these children then grow. Stunted children become stunted adults. The lack of an educated workforce. The lack of productivity in that workforce. The next ripple then, nations as a whole. And some nations are then starting to do economic analysis of the cumulative impact of stunting and malnutrition. 7%, 9% of GDP. Ethiopia did a study, and this cumulative impact over time of malnutrition and childhood stunting, 16% annual impact on their GDPs. Next ripple, continents, regions as a whole. Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, the World Bank, others that are tabulating this and calculating it, figure that these places in the world that are becoming that much more important in leading global economic growth lose on a yearly basis, 11% of GDP equivalency. 11%. So sometimes we wonder, why do some places in the world remain so poor? Largely it's because their children are getting off to such an awful start in life, and they carry that with them throughout life. The final ripple then is the entire world. The World Bank figures that it's about this cumulative impact of childhood malnutrition and stunting, wherever it may be in the world, is $3.5 trillion with a T, in economic activity that's lost every year. $3.5 trillion off the global economy and economic activity, from the lack of productivity, the lack of education of these children as they carry through life, and the increased healthcare cost that they have. Now, those are all really big numbers, but perhaps the greatest cost of malnutrition and childhood stunting is this opportunity cost. It's a poem not written or a song not sung. It's a novel not imagined, or a technology not invented. It's a horizon not explored. It's a cure not discovered. For who knows what a child might have accomplished for themselves, for their families, for their country, for the region, for all of us, were they not stunted. This lost chance of greatness for one child then becomes a lost chance for us all. Again, 1 in 4 worldwide, 1 in 3 in Africa and elsewhere in the developing world, and elsewhere in the emerging world. What madness grips us, and as Larry said, it undermines all of us, it hurts all of us. And so what better place to kind of discuss this opportunity cost than at Opportunity International and the work that you do, where the mission is to have everyone, particularly children, reach their maximum potential and achievements in life. So that's the outrage. But again, here comes the inspiration. Because there's this rising momentum in the last number of years to conquer malnutrition and stunting as our focus shifts from calories and measuring that, but to looking at this micronutrient deficiency, which a lot of times is called a hidden hunger, because you can't see, say, the lack of cognitive development that comes from stunting. And it's this burgeoning attention that's then focusing on this 1,000 days time frame and the importance of nutrition in that period. So investments in nutrition are increasing. They had been up until the last couple of years, maybe only 1% of all overseas development aid was spent on nutrition. It's mind-boggling, just 1%. So finally we're seeing more new investment vehicles come to put that up. And there's also innovations on the ground. And so I'd like to highlight one of them as I'll take you on the short story of one of the people that I write about in the first 1,000 days. So in the first 1,000 days book, so I write about, I follow moms and their children and their families through this 1,000-day period in 4 parts of the world: India, Uganda, Guatemala, and Chicago. And I also did Chicago because to emphasize that, look, this isn't a problem that's just over there somewhere. It's also so critical for our communities and the woeful state of nutrition in many of our families and the impact that that has on our children, along with everything else that goes into their formation. And so this Aaron and his mom, Brenda. So when I first meet, I'll say from the outset that I did not start the 1,000 days journey on day 1, the day of conception. That would have been like creepy. I'd have been slapped a lot and probably deported from these countries before I even started the writing. Hey, there's this guy who's like, peering through the windows or something. So I started like 4 or 5 months into the pregnancy. So Brenda, when I first meet her, is in Uganda, in northern Uganda. She's about 4 or 5 months pregnant, beautiful, bright smile, really cheerful disposition. But the more that I talked to her, I realized that this is, and her smile belied this deep sorrow. So as I was talking to her, she was saying that she had lost her first child, had died before just the 2nd week. And she was saying that her pregnancy, that was her first child, so her first pregnancy, she felt unwell most of the time. She was dizzy, tired, lack of appetite, headaches. She couldn't work in the field that much, and she's the moms in northern Uganda, and the one that I follows, they're all smallholder farmers. And so they're doing the work in the fields, and so she didn't have the energy to continue to work. She then goes to the hospital, the clinic, has her child. Child is okay, it's a small birth weight. Brenda is a little sore after the birth. It was a long delivery. So the doctor said, just stay in the hospital, you recover. The baby is with her, she's breastfeeding. Brenda gets better, the child gets sicker, the child contracted an infection in the hospital. It's compromised immune system again from an undernutrition in the first 1,000 days or while Brenda was pregnant. And the child dies before 2 weeks old. But now she's saying she's pregnant for a second time, and everything's going much better. Wow, she's feeling, has a lot of energy. The dizziness, she has no dizziness during this pregnancy, no headaches, she's feeling well. She's open to work in the field until the time that the baby comes. I said, what's the difference? He said, the only difference in our lives during that time are these new crops that we're starting to grow. A program called Harvest Plus, which is pioneering biofortification, where they raise the nutrient level in the staple crops that these farmers and these families are eating every day. Sometimes a couple of meals during the day. The corn in their area, the rice, the wheat, the cassava, the potatoes. So into their village then comes 2 of these crops. It's all done by traditional hybrid breeding. There's no GMOs involved. Here comes orange flesh sweet potatoes with this high vitamin A level. Vitamin A, really critical mineral, and high iron beans. Raised the level of iron content in beans that all beans have. And that's the only thing that's changed. I'm planting them, I'm consuming them myself. So she's full of energy, she gives birth, she's working in the field until the day of birth, doesn't have time to go to the clinic, which is kind of okay because she had lost her first child there. And the child is born by the traditional birth attendant who doesn't travel around with the scale, but she figures, there she is with Aaron. Wow, this is a big child, 8 pounds or so, the traditional birth attendant is figuring. Everybody in the neighborhood kind of coming over and looking. Wow, look how big Aaron is. It's remarkable. He's already beaten the odds in that area of northern Uganda, maybe 40% of child malnutrition and stunting. So he's doing great. She's taking him around to various places and showing, here's my great son, robust, active. She goes to her village, which isn't that far away, showing off Aaron. Everybody's coming around to see, wow, this big boy. And shortly after she arrives, somebody runs into her little family area and says, one of the elderly men in the community has come down with dysentery. All of a sudden, Brendan she's worried about this. She comes down with dysentery. Aaron comes down with dysentery. It's several months after this visit. I kept going back and forth during the 1,000 days to all these places. So I come back and I say, well, how's little Aaron? And she immediately starts to sob. And she says, he hasn't developed much since the last time that you were here. I said, what happened? And so she starts telling me this story. The dysentery comes. They rush him to the clinic. One good thing about that in African developments in recent years, their ability to treat disease like diarrhea, dysentery with the oral rehydration and other things is much improved. So Aaron eventually recovers. What she was so worried about and why she was sobbing as she was telling me this is she was thinking, am I about to lose my second child as well? Even though I'm doing all these things on the nutrition front, I'm growing these new crops, I'm eating them, there's all these cooking lessons that are coming that I'm implementing. Am I about to lose my second child as well? So nutrition then undermined by the bad water, the sanitation, the hygiene, and everything that comes with it. But she said Aaron is starting to recover. He's back. He's lively again. So hopefully his development continues. So the next time I go back, wow, there he is. Now he's about 13 months old. He's eating the orange flesh sweet potatoes. I mean, he just grabs them off the plate. Brenda, she boils them, she takes them out of the pot, they cool down. He just digs right in. There's the beans on his plate, greens, peanut sauce. She's learning to combine all these things for this nutrition because it's so important. She's learning in the first 1,000-day period. 2 years old, the end of the first 1,000 days. There's Aaron, like children everywhere, one sandal on, one sandal off. He's peering into an iPad, pictures of himself. So my wife's holding the iPad. She's taken all the photos that are in the book and on our journey. He's really excited about that. But you can see, I mean, there's a light in his eye, and so physically he's above the standard rates for a child at 2, so he's not physically stunted. And cognitively he seems to be aware of things. I've continued to follow them beyond 1,000 days, just to see how they're doing afterwards. So he's 2 in this picture. So then my next trip, I'm back, he's about 3.5 years old. And get to their little house area, their little surrounding of huts. And, Brenda says, how's Aaron? Oh, he's in school now. He's in school, great. He's 3.5, he's starting kindergarten, their first year of kindergarten. It's 3 levels. I'll go get him. I said, no, don't take him out of school. It's lunchtime, she says. I got to get him anywhere. So she goes and pedals off, and then she comes back like 15 minutes later, and there's Aaron on the back. And he's there for lunch, and he's got a big mug of porridge or milk. She bought him a uniform, like a size to fit him for the next 3 or 4 years, because the uniforms are an expense, right? So he doesn't want to have to follow that. So his short sleeves come down to here, and his short pants come, down past the knee. But he's great. And I said, how's he doing at school? She says, oh, he loves school. He's coming home, he's singing the songs, everything he's learning, he tells us about. And she says, one time when I went and picked him up, they said, yeah, Mom, we need to talk to you about Aaron. She says, oh, gee, now what's he done? And they said, the doctor, or the teachers were concerned. They said, look, when everybody else goes out to play and to recess, Aaron stays in his seat, and he doesn't go out and play with them. So we said, Aaron, you got to go out and play with them. And he still kept sitting there, and they say, why don't you go out and play? Why do you keep sitting here? And he said, I don't want to miss anything. In case there's a new song that's going to be sung, or the alphabet that they're beginning to learn. So he wants to sit there. And it's like, well, kind of what does he want to learn? And Brenda said, he tells us that he wants to drive. He wants to learn how to drive. Where does he want to go? We asked him that. He just said he wants to go and explore. So hopefully through all of that, not cognitively stunted. So Aaron's beating the odds of everybody in Uganda. So I give him a copy of the book. The book's out by then, right? He's holding in his hand, this blue thing is a folder of what my wife had compiled the photos for everybody, for all the families after the following them through the 1,000 days. So he's got that. So I give him the copy of the book, and he takes the book, and he puts it under his arm, and he's holding it tight, and he says something, everybody starts laughing. So I said, what did he say? And it's translated back to me. What Aaron said is, this is my book. If anybody wants it, they're going to have to fight me for it. And I said, keep up that attitude. Stay in your desk in school, learn how to read, and at another trip you can give me a book report about what all this is about. And so, in conclusion, Aaron beating the odds of Uganda. He's not stunted, hopefully be able to fulfill his potential. Realize the possibility of greatness that is in him. That's good for him, good for his family, good for Uganda, good for Africa. It's good for all of us. That's why there's reason to be optimistic about these advances that are coming. As we look at this, what is the persistent problem of hunger and malnutrition? This is why we do what we do. This is why you do what you do at Opportunity, to ensure that all children, Aaron, everybody else, has this opportunity to live up to their full potential. Keep up the great work. Thank you.